From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Issue 1, ISIS in America.
I have homegrown violent extremist investigations in every single state.
FBI Director James Comey warned last February that the Bureau was tracking Islamic State sympathizers located in all 50 states. George Washington University's Program on Extremism this month issued the first ever detailed public report about ISIS radicals in America. The report was released 2 days before the San Bernardino terrorist attack at an office Christmas party. The report warns of a, quote, sharp surge of jihadist activities in the U.S., unquote. So far this year, 56 ISIS supporters in the U.S. have been arrested. Their origin is in 8 nations: Egypt, Somalia, Jordan, Palestine, Yemen, Bosnia, Syria, and Ghana. 86% are male. 27% were planning attacks in the U.S. for some time. Most are U.S. citizens or permanent residents. 40% are converts to Islam. The average age is 26. Their common aim? To carry out, quote, jihad against kafirs, unquote. Holy war against infidels. Here's a chilling example of what ISIS is targeting. Veterans, patriots, Memorial, etc. Day parades, go on drive-bys, plus spill all their blood or rent a big truck and drive all over them. Kill them, unquote. Contrary to the perception that the internet and social media are the main recruiting tools for radicalization, the report found that, quote, individuals in clusters form radical Islamic cells, unquote, to carry out attacks. One such cluster in St. Louis was composed of Bosnian Muslims who had emigrated from the town of Teslik. Another cluster included a father and his 2 grown sons from Syria. These cells often fly below the radar of high-tech surveillance. If ISIS supporters keep murdering non-Muslims in America, will there be a backlash against immigration from Muslim countries? Pat Buchanan.
John, if there's 1 or 2 more of these attacks, Lord forbid, between now and the Iowa caucuses and New Hampshire primary, Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee. I mean, I know his proposal is very controversial, but what we've got in the United States, and we know it now from the FBI, are ISIS cells and ISIS personnel and ISIS sympathizers. We don't know how many exactly they are. We have no way, apparently, of really vetting them. That woman got in this country and who was a terrorist, hell-bent on murder, when she arrived with her new husband, or the husband-to-be. So I think the problem, and what Trump is touching in onto, is that Americans want to know, basically, are the folks coming into the country, are they coming here to kill us? Do we have any way to know that? And if we don't, maybe we ought to have a moratorium on immigration from the Islamic world. And to a lot of folks, I know that's fascism or Mussolini, to other folks it makes common sense.
Helena.
Well, in the world of ISIS, what Trump is saying and doing, and the rhetoric that is now catching fire, certainly within the Republican primary process, is like pouring gasoline on the fire for what ISIS is trying to do. Michael McCaul, who's the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, had a breakfast with reporters this week, and he said ISIS is 50,000 strong, 20,000, I guess you could say, indigenous, 30,000 from like 100 countries around the world. And their main recruiting device is through the internet. And they're young, they're savvy, they've mastered all the dark portions of the internet. They've created encrypted applications. We can't go after them, and their message is 1, come to Syria and join the jihad, or 2, fight where you are. So the new battlefield is social media, and I think you're going to see Hillary Clinton in her speech, I think it's on Tuesday, where she's going to outline her strategy to fight ISIS, to sort of, let's get the heads of the social media companies together and figure out what kind of tools we have so that their sites aren't used just for, open recruiting stations for ISIS.
Well, who has the most at stake in preventing ISIS attacks inside the U.S.? Tom.
Well, obviously the FBI has the most at stake because that's their responsibility. Fortunately, they're very good at that. But the challenge we face is that when the Islamic State banner continues to fly with a sense of being able to deter American power, this is where you see the direction, the connection point between the Islamic State's perceived success in Iraq and Syria and around the world, gaining fealty from other Salafi jihadist groups. Where that continues, it builds that up. And I think two noticeable points come out from this report. Number one, if you look at the 40% are converts, that shows that idea that Eleanor is talking about in the degree of people wanting a cause, wanting a gang, wanting to be able to join up. So they are taking Islam, joining up to that in that worst element. And another thing that comes out of that report mentions the Bosnian immigrants coming to the United States. One thing we have to be aware of very critically in this country is that, and I will use a personal example, a very good friend of mine, Bosnian immigrant to the United States, American citizen, now with the State Department, Muslim, incredibly talented, incredibly patriotic. And an extension to that, who do we think with these CIA operations in Pakistan and around the Middle East? They are not the CIA officers who are delivering that. They do not look like me. They look like they come from the places where they are fighting and they are putting their lives on the line. And a lot worse, if you go and Google William F. Buckley, they know what these terrorist groups would do if they caught them. So it's about binding together that sense of proportion to the threat, but also realism about the many good, incredibly patriotic American Muslims we have in this country.
A Muslim pointed this out to me in response to the question that I gave you and Eleanor, who has the most at stake in preventing ISIS attacks inside the United States? And his answer was Muslim U.S. citizens, and of course he's a Muslim.
Right.
To avoid becoming pariahs, they need to be seen as doing all in their power to discourage extremism, express tolerance for other religions, and cooperate with authorities in reporting extremists in their midst.
Right.
I said, that's what you have to do. And I said, do you do it? And he says, yes, I do it as best I can.
And you know what? They're doing it too. Muslim leaders are denouncing violence. Muhammad Ali came out the other day, probably the most famous Muslim in America. And that's part of the problem, though, publicizing the positive aspects of what's going on in Muslim communities. We in the news pathologically go where things aren't working the way they're supposed to, which is why we focus on those who happen to be ISIS supporters. But the question is, what do you do about it? I think closing the borders now is closing the barn door after the horse has gotten out already.
Though,
well, let's deal with the reality of social media.
Okay, I know that, but
other aspects
ISIS
like
knows
that.
all this stuff too.
Right.
And if I were in ISIS, what I would do is I would say, look at the two characters commanded the entire media of the United States and still do for a week. Do one or two more of these things. They would up one of their sleeper cells, get this done, and we can elect and nominate and elect Donald Trump, and the Great War with Islam is on.
Until we destroy the Islamic State, though, with expediency, that banner, again, it has to, the propaganda element, that stupid black flag with a shah. Anyway, you have to destroy the flag and the brand. And that takes military power in the Middle East, and it also takes recognition of the
How's that going to stop ISIS in Libya? How's it going to ISIS in Iraq?
I agree with you, Pat, to the point that,
world.
yes, there will be an increased call up for us to go to arms against ISIS in the Middle East, which we ultimately have to do one way or the other.
And
right now, we're already in the course of building
Syria,
that.
ISIS, please send 10,000 Americans into Iraq.
Right.
Yeah,
They're begging for the Great War with the Americans.
I know we are.
Why
That's
don't you
absolutely
comply
right.
with them?
All right, we
Well,
do all that, but if you're on a terror watch list, you can still go out and buy a gun. I mean, all this tough talk sounds really good.
Not tough talk.
But
I'm saying that what will happen
when
if
it
we have
comes to
another
actually
attack.
doing anything,
All
there
right,
aren't
you're gonna
any
come home and
appropriate
come
ideas.
to my house and take all my guns away. How's that going to make it America?
Exit
We're not taking your
question.
guns away, Pat. Don't
You
worry
can
about
have
your
your
guns.
guns.
Your guns
There's a lot of
Exit
other people
question. Should Americans now prepare themselves to live like Israelis, expecting and guarding against frequent attacks from radicalized Muslim neighbors? Yes or no?
John, let me just say this. Look, we haven't had many Americans. What do we have? 14 killed, something like that. But it's it's on everybody's mind. There's no question about it. We're going to have more of these, but more Americans will die from auto accidents and from shootouts in cities and stuff like that. But in terms of dominating the media and affecting the politics of 2015 and 2016, this is it.
It's definitely affecting the politics, and people, what's the line? If you see something, say something. People need to be vigilant, but you need to go about and live your life, because it's a cliche now. Otherwise, the terrorists win.
Very, very simple. You have to take the fight over there. That's why, we have to have a pressing element on the White House to get real about being more aggressive in this strategy, because it flows into the United States threat, the continuing power of ISIS.
Yeah, well, we weren't sitting on our hands. It's a question of how many bombs do you want to drop, and how many troops do you want to put on the ground, because eventually that has to happen. And where do they come from? That's why the administration is moving in the way that they are. That's too slow for some people. But Americans are not that keen on putting 300,000 troops in
We're not talking about
the Middle East.
That's what the president
You've got to build,
No
you've
one's
got to
saying
build
that.
the coalition and getting Putin on board and getting Assad out of there. But all of that takes time. It's not going to happen
But our
overnight.
Arab allies
Meanwhile, you
won't
have to
fight.
deal with all those displaced
Our-
people from Syria,
Our
and they
Arab
deserve
allies
to be
won't
treated
send
humanely.
any troops.
All right, let's go.
Our Arab
We need to
allies
get
won't
on
send
about
troops.
that, yeah.
All right, let's move it along. Issue 2, Muslims not welcome?
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
Donald Trump sparked a firestorm of controversy this week when he called for Muslims to be banned from entering the United States. Mr. Trump says a ban is necessary to protect Americans from the threat of Islamic terrorism, but many disagree. The White House said Mr. Trump was behaving like a quote-unquote carnival barker, and that his proposal quote-unquote disqualifies him from serving as President of the United States. Mr. Trump's fellow GOP presidential candidates also chimed in. Jeb Bush described Mr. Trump's comments as quote-unquote unhinged. Marco Rubio said they were quote-unquote offensive and outlandish. Chris Christie said Mr. Trump had adopted a quote-unquote ridiculous position. And from the Democratic presidential lineup, criticism was also fierce. Hillary Clinton described Trump's call as, quote, reprehensible, prejudiced, and divisive, unquote. And Martin O'Malley described Mr. Trump as a, quote-unquote, fascist demagogue. And get this, breaking from diplomatic protocol of staying outside foreign elections, British Prime Minister David Cameron said Mr. Trump is, quote-unquote, divisive, unhelpful, and quite simply wrong. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also released a statement saying he, quote, rejects the recent comments by Donald Trump with regard to Muslims. Israel respects all religions and diligently guards the rights of all its citizens, end quote. I have a stack of newspapers here at this seat of mine, and I want to start with the New York Times to illustrate the extent to which Donald Trump has gained the extraordinary attention of the American public and the American government. The poll, this is the top of the page of the New York Times. Poll has Trump on the right-hand column. First page. Poll has Trump gaining ground on terror fear. Attacks raise concern. And inside the New York Times, there is, I believe, an opportunity to gauge what people think with regard to this matter. Are you surprised, Eleanor, the extent to which Trump has commanded the situation? Here it continues in here. New populism puts the old guard on the defensive. It then goes to a full page, practically.
And if you go to the final paragraph or two, you'll see Pat Buchanan is quoted because he ran on similar populism 20 years ago, 15 years ago? 20 and 15. Okay.
Count the days.
Right. And I think the American people are scared, and Mr. Trump is playing into those fears. But his own party is also scared, and they think if he is the nominee, that they will lose not only the presidency, but they will lose the Senate and perhaps even the House. Because polls show that while a plurality of Republicans like what Donald Trump is saying, and a strong majority of Americans recoil from the notion that you would have this blanket test not to let people into this country. It's too reminiscent of how we handled the Jews during World War II or the Chinese in the 1880s. And I think people find it abhorrent. And Trump is now being sort of ostracized by his party, and but they don't know how to stop him at this point because he's unleashed something that nobody seems to know how to end.
John, Trump has
before I let you in, let me also point out the Wall Street Journal. This is another extraordinary newspaper with extraordinary power, and here we have this recognition of Trump on page 1 of today's Friday's newspaper. Split on Trump Muslim ban.
Yep.
Poll finds a majority against candidate's plan, but Republican voters are more supportive.
All right, John, let me
Now,
talk
what do you
to-
make of this?
Let me talk to this. Look, there's no doubt about it. Trump, this is a firestorm to top all firestorms this week about Trump. He's being compared to Mussolini and Hitler. People are going berserk. The Republican Party is virtually, I guess the establishment of the Republican Party has all come out and attacked him. What Trump has done here is solidified his base in the Republican Party, increased it somewhat 8 weeks before the polling starts. At the same time, a majority of Americans are clearly against this, and everyone's saying it's unconstitutional, it's un-America, it's not who we are. They're attacking him, but I'll tell you, if something like, I think as of now, Trump is stronger as a consequence of this week going into Iowa and New Hampshire with a stronger possibility of winning the nomination than he did before the week started.
Well, and he came out with all this because he had slipped to number 2 in Iowa. And the man has a gift for putting himself into the news cycle and reminding everyone that he's the best at politics.
That much giftedness to Donald Trump.
Right.
Donald Trump is a showman. We know that. He had a top-rated TV program for years, The Apprentice, which got just about as many viewers as the first Republican debate got, which is a big deal for political news. We don't get that kind of audience. And I think that this is big news now because everybody was surprised.
The point I'm
listen
making
to my
is
point first.
you
Okay?
have the dominant expressions of opinion in newspapers in the United States accepting
getting to
him
that.
seriously.
I'm getting to that.
Oh, yeah.
The fact is, I think that this is big news because all the Washington elites, including us, and the Republican, Democratic elites, the media elites, everybody underestimated the power of selling fear to the American public.
Is the balloon going to burst or be burst?
I think the balloon will burst when Trump hits his ceiling. Now, Pat is right. There's unforeseen circumstances such as another terror attack, say, for example, attack people. But I think at some point, voters, even those people who haven't been voting all their lives and this kind of thing, are going to say, we need somebody sensible to deal with this terror problem. And that's where you're going to see people turning more to Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, folks like that on the Republican ticket, or Hillary Clinton on the Democrats.
Pat is right that in the populist terms, if there is another attack, this helps Trump. But it also requires a candidate on the conservative side to actually explain the core principle of conservatism, even going back to Lincoln and slavery. Or Pat and I
How
had a
about
good
Ted
discussion
Cruz
about
and
that.
Marco Rubio?
Well, exactly.
Are they doing that?
And pushing up and directly challenging. And I think you will see that in the debate coming up next week.
Trump's support is the mirror image of the distrust and the dislike and the contempt for the American establishment on the part of the American people. He bashes the establishment, media and political, and the country agrees with that, whether they agree with his verbiage or not.
There are Trump-like figures all over the world,
They're
and
doing
in
well.
Europe, yes, because of the failure of the political establishment.
Exactly.
But the floor and the ceiling of Trump's support are about the same, and it's about 30%. And that's
sure of that?
30% of a Republican electorate. I don't think I subscribe to the conventional wisdom. You have him as your nominee, you're going to lose grandly.
Why is he running almost even with Hillary in the polls?
Because these are early polls. That's
Right.
why.
Well, Goldwater was down 60 or
Hillary's not
55 points.
Hillary's not running against anybody right now. Wait till it gets serious. If we really get serious this time next year, and you got Trump versus Hillary, then let's see what the polls look like. I don't think it's going to look like this.
You've got the Republican Party.
I may be wrong. Yeah, that's what predictions are about,
Here's a
right?
close compromise thing. If we could tighten the rules at checkpoints, people coming in, and we say, if you've been associated with a certain area, for example, of Pakistan in your background, then you go and have an interview. So I'll give you one quick.
is
We already
already
do this.
happening.
They're
We
all
expand this.
interviewed in
But
person.
so British Pakistanis coming over to the United States will be interviewed when they come in. That is a hard measure, but a necessary measure to some degree
doing a
as a
lot of that
proportional
now.
approach.
John,
But let them
I
in
get-
when you know they're
I
okay.
get questioned just because I've got Yemen
Right,
stamp in
right,
my passport.
right.
I get extra questioning
Right.
because of that.
Trump called Monday for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States because of terrorism perpetrated by radical Muslims, including a married couple who fatally shot 14 people and wounded 22 at a holiday workplace party in San Bernardino, California last week. His comments have been rebuked by politicians across the U.S. spectrum and by world leaders from Muslim and non-Muslim countries alike. It's a worldwide phenomenon, Donald Trump is.
And hatred is a worldwide phenomenon.
Well,
too, and that's
British
what we're
Prime-
Debate
concerned
him and
about
defeat
here.
him through that. Do
And
not try and shut him down.
people-
Ask him
People-
what he
That's
thinks of British Prime Minister David Cameron, who said Tuesday that Trump's comments about Muslims were divisive, quote, divisive, unhelpful, and quite simply wrong. What do you think of that?
Cameron's
you
politically
disagree
What do
correct.
you think of that?
I think
Yeah.
David Cameron, in terms of the comments, but look, free speech, you have got to have the debate. The reason Europe is so screwed with these issues is they don't want to have the debate. And Eleanor is writing about that failure, that political establishment. The establishment needs to recognize what Pat's saying about the populist appeal, but debate him and challenge him and say why this is not the United States.
And educate the public.
The UK Independence Party is very sympathetic to what Trump said, are they
Well,
not?
but they
Right,
are,
but
but
they
to some
are
degree,
They-
they're
fringe
more
party.
moderate than a lot of the extremist groups, though.
Well, that's
Well,
you're looking at the future, Tom.
right.
Like I
We'll
said,
be,
Donald Trump can make Ted Cruz look moderate.
Well, I just want to know what Trump's going to do with all his properties in the Arab world now because he's
yeah.
insulted everyone over there. Maybe he just calls them up and say, "Hey, this is politics. Just kidding."
No, the better story is what's he doing with his properties near the Hebrides in Scotland.
Yeah, because that's where you're from.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, there's a
Got a nice golf course there, doesn't
McLaughlin up there is a familiar name.
he?
right.
He's got a nice
And I'm
golf
waiting
course
to
there.
see if there is a John McLaughlin. I
Okay.
think there is. Issue 3, Women Warriors.
To succeed in our mission of national defense, we cannot afford to cut ourselves off from half the country's talents and skills. We have to take full advantage of every individual who can meet our standards.
In a major announcement, U.S. Secretary of Defense Ash Carter announced that female personnel will soon be eligible to serve in all U.S. military combat units. That is, assuming they pass relevant selection courses. This means female personnel will soon be able to apply for elite special operations units, like the U.S. Army's 1st Special Forces, Operational Detachment Delta, and the U.S. Navy's SEAL teams. But signifying disquiet by some in the U.S. military, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Marine General Joe Dunford, was absent from Secretary Carter's announcement. The Marines had asked to retain male-only combat infantry units. Secretary Carter rejected that request. Is Secretary Carter's decision based on national security interests, or is he trying to introduce an issue into the 2016 presidential campaign that he thinks will benefit Hillary?
I don't think this is political. This has been in the works for a long time. Women have actually been doing these jobs. Tammy Duckworth, who's a member of the House, who's going to run for the Senate in Illinois, was a helicopter pilot in Iraq and lost both her legs. Women can do these jobs, and when 3 or 4 women graduated from Ranger School earlier this year, competing equally with all the men. This is not affirmative action, and it doesn't mean a flood of women are going to go into these combat units. It's still a minority of women who are going to be able to meet these qualifications, but it opens up a path for career advancement, and they're going to get paid for jobs that they've been doing anyway. This is the modern world, and Ash Carter would not have done anything without the White House backing him, certainly.
Do you think Carter has calculated that the GOP presidential candidates will be asked about the policy at the upcoming Las Vegas debate, and many will oppose it? This will solidify female support for Hillary, who of course supports it. It's pure politics. I don't agree with
I
that.
would believe that if George W. Bush had not supported women in the military, but he did. This crosses partisan lines. In fact, it's a practical decision. Women have shown themselves to be as good or better than men in the various units that called upon their intellectual or emotional abilities. It's only in the physical area, particularly anything involving upper body strength, where we see a gap. At the same time, though, as the women that Eleanor just mentioned showed with their recent training, women can succeed in those jobs, but there aren't that many of them.
The difficulty, though, is that, and this is why I disagree with the judgment, is that as much as women have played an incredibly important role, especially what you talk about there, intelligence, being able to get information from people who perhaps would not be as willing, women in predominantly Muslim countries who wouldn't want to talk to men, who've been helicopter pilots, combat pilots, served with distinction. The problem in terms of the combat infantry, and this is why General Dunford wasn't there and why I don't support this, is that the statistics show that women are more predisposed to physical injury during training. If that was not true, I would absolutely support that. And my concern is that where you have a combat infantry unit in fire maneuver, like Helmand Province, Afghanistan, where someone gets hit and you have to extricate that person under fire, the risk to the unit and thus to the mission becomes too extreme.
The timing of the announced change. Wait a minute. The
Israel has
timing.
the
Wait a
finest
minute. With the
military.
timing of the announced change is suspect. Carter timed the announcement to come out shortly before the Las Vegas debate, and with about 6 weeks to go before the first voting in the 2016 presidential race.
Let me get into this, John.
True or false?
This is an absurdity, this whole thing. The idea of putting your women into combat, the Israelis tried it for a while. It didn't work. They pulled them out. We had women pilots. One of them crashed her plane into a carrier. They don't have the stamina, the endurance. It goes against human nature. It goes against history. It's a social and ideological experiment. If they're equal, why don't we draft them and register them equally? And would half of the
We don't have a
these
draft.
would half
We don't
of the
have a
force
draft.
would half of the force going up those cliffs and beaches at Normandy, if they were women, would we have done better?
Out of time. Bye-bye.